Western Pleasure class that offers a challenge to the novice rider as well as the top professionals.
It starts off from being an entry-level event going up to a highly skilled, highly competitive sport. The AQHA has started the novice youth and the novice amateur classes, so it doesn't matter whether you're 5 or 6 years old or 65, 70, 80 years old. You've got a class you can get started in.
AQHA World Championship titles are not easy to come by. Trainers Mike Moser and Alex Ross have proved time after time that they both have the experience, talent, and desire to be winners in the show arena. Mike Moser of Gainesville, Texas began showing at the young age of 5 and has been professionally showing and training horses since 1976. As the owner of Mike Moser Quarter Horses, he has trained and shown numerous AQHA and Congress Western Pleasure champions. Known to take home more championship buckles than he'll ever get to wear, Alex Ross of Greensboro, North Carolina, is a familiar face on the show circuit. Alex draws upon an impressive background as a trainer and owner of Alex Ross Quarter Horses, as well as having judged AQHA-approved shows throughout the United States, New Zealand, and Europe. Alex also serves as an AQHA National Director and member of the Show and Contest Committee.
Hi, I'm Alex Ross. And I'm Mike Moser, and we'd like to show you what Western Pleasure is all about. When a horse is trained for Western Pleasure, if the trainers have done a very good job with him, that should be the foundation training for that horse for the rest of his life for any other event he wants to do. If he is trained correctly as a pleasure horse and is shown as a pleasure horse young, if he has the athletic talent to someday go into the reining, go into the cutting, his training as a Western Pleasure horse should have been the most benefit to him of any training that he will ever get.
In competition, the qualities that we look for in a horse are balance, rhythm, good cadence, and a free-flowing motion. We're looking for him to be alert with his ears, steady, consistent with his head and neck, and consistent with his movement throughout the whole class. In this video, Mike and I will show you how to select and show your Western Pleasure horse. We'll cover performance, movement, conformation. We'll look at a young horse and talk about show ring rules.
In Western Pleasure, the most important aspects of the class are the movement and the performance of the horse. Later on, we will show you what we look for in ideal movement. Right now, I'm going to come in and demonstrate to you what we look for in the performance aspect of our class. First, I'll start off here and I'll show you what we want in a horse at a walk. At the walk, we just want the horse to be nice and relaxed. Personally, I kind of like for a horse to kind of show some expression with his ears, to kind of look around, kind of see where he's going. While you're showing your horse at the walk, the rider should be nice and quiet. He should be taking his hands, having to keep checking the horse, having to keep messing with the horse, trying to rate his speed. Ideally, at the walk is the same as all 3 gaits. You want a horse to walk consistently the same all the time. Now we'll go on to the jog. In our Western Pleasure class, when horses are asked to jog, we want one that steps off upon his rider's commands. When he hits his jog, we want him to be at a real nice, relaxed jog. The performance of this gait is one where we want to see the horse be totally consistent. We don't want to see him at one time being real slow at his jog, then a couple steps later we want to keep building and moving on a little faster. At the same token, if the horse is moving on just a little bit, we don't want to look around and see him all of a sudden slowing back down. We want a real nice and consistent movement at the jog and a real nice consistent speed, whatever speed is comfortable for the horse to do. We want a horse to keep his head just as consistent as we do on his speed. Of course, naturally, the best place for a horse to carry his head is in a real level, and real balanced manner. When I say level, I'm looking for a horse that along through here on his withers, he keeps his head kind of straight out in front of him. He can be allowed to have his head up a few inches from being perfectly level or down just a few inches. But basically we're talking about the top line from the top of the neck where the mane is. We want that to try to stay as much of a straight line as we can. Again, there's nothing wrong with a horse that wants to keep his head up just a little bit, especially if he likes to kind of look to see where he's going. We don't want the horse swinging his head from side to side, looking around to see what's behind him or what's on the side of him. We'd like to see him look, but we want him to keep it in a real nice and real still manner. Now I have this horse here on a reasonably loose rein. This is the length that I personally prefer for my reins to be and for my horses to be shown at. Horses are also allowed to be shown on light contact, which I will demonstrate. When I say light contact, what I mean is the reins may be taken up, they may not be loose, but just very light contact with the horse's mouth. And this should be allowed. Personally, I prefer the loose rein because it gives you a chance, again, to make an impression in the judge's mind that your horse is broke and does not need the light contact to perform his maneuvers. Also, as far as the rider is concerned, you want to make sure that you can show by your riding that that horse is very comfortable, very easy to ride, very smooth to ride. You don't want any excess movement, no excess movement with your hands, with your legs, or with your seat. Now we'll go on off into the lope. At a lope, again, we're looking for the exact same things in the horse's head and neck. We're looking for the same consistency that he showed us at his jog, at his walk and at his jog. We want him to pretty much kind of pick out a speed that's comfortable and real nice for the horse, and then we'd like to see him stay at that exact same speed. What that does is that shows us brokenness in a horse. Plus, it also makes it more comfortable to ride the horse. Our transition into our lopes, our transitions into any gait should be really nice and smooth. I personally like to see a horse that can just step off really smooth and easy. I want to see him pick up his hindquarters first, engage behind, lift up his shoulders without having to use his head and neck to do that, and step right off in it upon my command. The same as when we come down into them. If we come down from our lope into our jog or to a walk or to a standstill, we want to see him do it really nice and smooth. Right now, I'll come around and I'll just come down to a nice, really nice, relaxed walk. We also have another gait. In our Western Pleasure class, really all three gaits, the walk, jog, and the lope, can be asked to be extended. The most commonly extension of our gaits that is asked for is the extended jog. When the extension of the jog is called for, the horse must move on out. Again, just like any other transition, he must respond to the rider's commands. You want to see him do it in a real nice, relaxed manner. We want to see them do more than just speed up. We want to see them extend the jog. When the extended jog is called for, it's also very common ask the horses to come back to the regular jog. When they do, they should come back down, again showing the same willingness to accept their rider's commands. They should do it very slight. There shouldn't be any movement from the rider's hands or really any cues to show off the best that you can. The horse should do it where it's almost you can't see anything that ever done. That was perfectly for a performance horse. If sometimes you have to kind of take hold of a horse to get his attention, just to come down just a little bit, that's perfectly fine. That's not going to count against you. But if the showmanship and your horsemanship skills are good, you've got your horse trained very well, that's another aspect where you can really show off your horse and show off how broke he really is. After the horses have worked the first way of the arena, they also will be asked to work the opposite way also at all three gates again. We don't like to see what some call a totally loss of forward momentum. In other words, we don't want to stop and just stand there. If you come down from your gates and you come down to your walk, when the reverse is asked for, some people like to kind of walk the horses around in a little bit of a circle. Personally, myself, if I've got one really broke, I like to just stop him, second, turn him with my legs. Again, this is something that I like to show off where I don't have to really handle the horse to do it. And as soon as I turn around, I'm going to walk back off. Whether you walk around in a circle or whether you pivot around is up to the discretion of the rider.
Now I'd like to show you another example of a Western pleasure horse demonstrating excellent performance. This 5-year-old quarter horse mare has won numerous championships. She has a good rhythm at the walk, looking through the bridle nicely. Her nose is in front of vertical slightly, but yet she's still responsive to the rider's cues. Now let's watch the transition from the walk to the jog. As you can tell, this mare moved forward with very little visible cue from the rider. Transitions are very important in the Western pleasure class. It shows how broke the horse is to the rider's cues. Now we'll move right up and show you a transition from the jog into the lope. With very little visible cue from the rider, the horse steps directly into the lope. The more visible the cue to the judge, the less the overall picture is. And of course, showmanship in Western pleasure is a very important part of the class. It certainly separates the top horses from the ones that place in the middle of the class. In any transition, we're looking for the horse to change gaits without changing the frame of his body. I feel the best asset this horse is presenting us is its consistency. From the time she's entered the arena until this point, she has not changed her frame, her attitude, or her way of going. This is the frame we're looking for in Western pleasure. This horse's poll is level with the withers, with the nose slightly in front of the vertical. Now the horse's head carriage is too low. By AQHA rules, a horse that carries his head with the tip of his ears consistently below the level of his withers for more than 5 strides will be disqualified. Here is another example of a horse that would be disqualified in AQHA approved competition. This horse shows intimidation. Not only is his head too low, his nose is behind the vertical.
This is an 11-year-old gelding that has won numerous championships in Western pleasure. This horse is another excellent example of the performance we're looking for in the Western pleasure class. As we move into the jog, you will notice the ease and the smoothness with which the horse goes from the walk into the jog. At the jog, this horse stays really nice and consistent. He takes the same stride every time. His speed doesn't vary. He doesn't try to speed up. He doesn't try to slow down. He stays exactly the same. As this horse goes into his lope, notice the ease with which he does that and the smoothness with which he does it. When we talk about performance in our Western pleasure horse, these are things that we're looking for. The brokenness of the horse, the trainability of the horse should always come through. As you notice this horse loping around, You wonder, well, what makes this horse so good at doing his job? If you'll watch this horse's hindquarters, from the top of his hips down to his feet, he shows us the type of engagement that we want to see in a Western pleasure horse. Watch how far underneath, how deep the back leg comes up under, thus driving the horse through his whole body from his hind legs.
A good way to understand engagement is to visualize lines drawn through the horse's legs in movement. On this engaged horse, the lines form a parallelogram. The hind legs are working under the horse, and the forelegs are reaching out in front of the horse. Because the hind legs are stepping under, this horse is able to carry more weight with his hind legs, therefore shifting his center of gravity to the rear. This makes the front legs freer and lighter. The horse is better balanced to support the rider's weight, and most importantly for Western pleasure, a horse that moves in this manner will be better able to achieve a relaxed, slow rhythm without losing the pure cadence of the gait. This horse is alert and maintaining a good lift in the lope.
Sometimes through the training, we can help this engagement some more and maybe make them use themselves better. But a horse naturally has to have really good engagement from behind before you ever start.
Today we've shown you 3 different horses, an 11-year-old gelding, a 5-year-old mare, and a 3-year-old gelding that have all shown us traits as to why they're great performance horses. They all show us good engagement behind, a pure, even cadence, good fluent movement, a slow rhythm, and consistent performance. The ability of the horse to engage behind means the ability of the horse to use his back, hip, and hind leg to propel himself forward as he moves across the ground. Fluent movement is the ability of the horse to move softly and gracefully across the ground while moving forward. An even, pure cadence of gait means the footfalls are falling precisely when they should at each gait. Rhythm is the speed of the legs as it relates to the cadence of the horse. We prefer horses to have a nice, natural, slow rhythm as they move across the ground without showing intimidation. A consistent performer is a horse that performs the 3 gaits with the same speed and frame as he moves around the arena. Now that we've watched these 3 horses perform, let's focus in on the movement of the Western pleasure horse, and we'll begin with a walk. At the walk, we're looking for a definite 4-beat gait. In other words, each leg would hit the ground at a different time. At the walk, the gait will go left rear, left front, right rear, right front. With the assistance of our wraps, we can see red, green, black, purple. Let's look again. Red, green, black, purple. At the walk, we want him flat-footed, a good 4-beat walk. The horse, we want him alert, not walking too slow, nor walking too fast where he's prancing. As you can see on this horse, his walk is not only short and choppy, but notice how quick he breaks over in his knee, sets his foot down and gets right back off of it, which could be because of his upright shoulder and pastern. He's uncomfortable in his front legs, which is causing him to lose the correct rhythm of the walk. Instead of the evenly spaced 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm, this horse is too quick with his front legs. This is not the desired flat-footed, evenly spaced rhythm that we look for in the walk.
This is another excellent example of a walk on our Western pleasure horse. Again, he has the nice flat-footed 4-beat cadence that we want to see. He walks around with his head and neck real attentive to what's going on around him, but yet he's really relaxed, and you can tell that he's waiting for his rider's command. Again, you can see that natural 4-beat cadence. You've got the right rear, right front, left rear, left front.
The next of the 3 gaits we're going to look at is the jog. At the jog, the horse has a 2-beat cadence. The diagonal legs move and hit the ground precisely at the same time. As you can tell with this horse, the red bandages hit the ground at the same time, and the black bandages hit the ground at the same time. In other words, left rear, right front, right rear, left front. Let's take a look and see. Red, black, red, black. Pretty easy to see. A real nice horse, real good cadence. What we're looking for in the Western Pleasure horse today.
Here is another excellent example of a jog that we look for on our Western Pleasure horses. Again, notice the evenness of his stride. Even in his front legs, both front legs take the same length of stride. Both of his back legs take the same length of stride compared with one another. All four legs together take exactly the same stride front and back. In a jog, I like to see a horse have as flat a knee as he can. In other words, when his feet hit the ground, when they come back up, the whole leg kind of comes up and it stays flat. To have a flat knee on a jog, the horse cannot be picking his knees up to be placing his leg. He has to do it with his shoulders and with his hindquarters driving from behind to push the horse along. Also in the jog, I like to see one have what I call a tight hock. When I say a tight hock, what I mean is a horse that does not leave his hocks out behind himself. His hocks are directly underneath him, never getting out behind, never being sloppy, and they look real strong. A horse has to drive himself from behind. If a horse is at a jog, if the hock comes out and stays out behind the point of the hip for very long, it makes the horse have a real draggy appearance. As you can see, this horse is picking up his hock and placing it dead underneath him and is driving himself from behind all the time.
In this particular horse, we're seeing a definite lack of cadence. Notice how the front foot hits the ground well before the opposite rear. The diagonal legs, the left front and the right rear, and the right front and the left rear do not strike the ground at the same time. The front foot strikes the ground slightly before the diagonal rear foot. This shows a lack of cadence and a 4-beat gait as opposed to the 2-beat gait we're really looking for in the Western Pleasure class. A definite difference from the other horse we saw jogging. Two of the most important parts of movement are cadence and rhythm. Cadence is the precise moment that the feet strike the ground or the foot falls. It's important to have a good cadence. Without a good cadence, we cannot have a horse that performs well nor places in the Western Pleasure class.
As we watch this horse, let's compare it to the good jog that we showed you earlier today. Notice how far out behind this horse's hocks are, taking a lot longer stride than this horse's front legs are taking. The hocks stay way out behind it, never really reaching a point of staying up underneath it and balancing this horse. If you remember the sorrel horse that we've seen, when he used his hocks, they were always up underneath him. They were never behind him. When I say behind, they never came past the point of his hips and stayed out. They were always up underneath, always driving. This horse's hocks are always out behind, never really getting up underneath the horse's hip.
The horse's movement originates from behind, so without engagement, it's impossible to have a horse that performs correctly.
This horse does not have what we call a natural jog. This is a good example of a horse that is really too long a strided trotter to be used for a jog in a Western Pleasure class. We've tried to take his trot down to where it was slow enough to try to make it resemble a jog, but this is a classic example of a horse that just naturally does not have a nice jog to him. If you ever get to where in the training you're having to overtrain and the horse is not giving you a natural look, he's not giving you that real easy willingness to do it, you've overtrained the horse and you're not making him any better. So there's a lot of times that you have to back off and stay within that natural boundary.
Now I'd like to show you a horse at the lope. This horse shows us terrific engagement, good cadence and rhythm, a very balanced horse here. We can tell that he's enjoying his job. Because of the engagement behind, this horse is able to lift his shoulder and place his front foot out in front of him in the fashion that we desire. At the lope, we have a 3-beat cadence. The first beat of the cadence is the right hind foot. That pushes the horse off the ground and starts the lope. The second beat would be the left rear and the right front, and the third beat is the left front foot with the assistance of our ramps, we can see black, purple, red. Black, purple, red. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Notice we have a slight pause between 3 and 1 each time.
As we watch this mare trying to lope around here, we can all see that she's not a good loper. She never does ever hit a 3-beat lope. Her lead leg a hit, the all front leg a hit, and in the 2 back legs. She never gets into a true 3-beat lope. It's always a 4-beat lope. The reason for that is this mare has no usability in her body whatsoever. A lot of that is doing because of her conformation of being so heavy in the front and so thick in the neck and not being able to free up and use her shoulders. In reality, this mare is just pulling herself along with her front end, not pushing herself along with her hindquarters like she should. If we'll put this in slow motion, you can see how far out behind her drive leg really is. Her drive leg is her left hind leg. That's the first leg that starts the 3-beat motion of the lope. If you watch and study this mare, you can see that this mare is carrying all of her weight on the front end. She's grabbing with her front feet and just pulling herself along. The back legs are just along for the ride. If you watch the gray horse that we used at the lope, you can tell a definite difference. Whereas that horse was engaged from behind, he'd use his hind legs to drive his whole body. He pushed himself along all the time. He was very balanced, and he carried a major portion of his weight with his hind legs. This mare, you can see, she carries no weight with her hind legs. She carries it all on her front end. This is what makes her use so much need.
Here's another example of a good horse at the lope. I'd like to show you this horse because of her softness and gracefulness as she covers the ground. Just look at this horse, how effortlessly she moves forward. Her head and neck are in a very relaxed position. Let's look at the engagement this horse shows us behind. Notice how she's using her back, hip, and hind leg to move forward. And of course, because of her balance on her hind leg, she's lifting her wither and able to move her shoulder forward, placing her front end out in front of her without using much knee.
The pleasure horse is easy to pick out because the best ones are the ones that make it look like it's the easiest for them to do. If it's a real easy for them to do, usually they're good movers, and also their expressions with their head and necks and with their ears will show you just how easy it is for them to do it. A horse that's doing something that's hard for him to do will usually show you in his head and neck that he's not comfortable doing it. This mare has a 3-beat gait, but she is not a very good loper. She uses a lot of knee as compared to the other horses that we use, where they use their shoulders and their backs and their hindquarters to engage and lift their body and use their body. This mare keeps her shoulders pinned down, her back down, and has no freedom to use her hindquarters at all.
Also, poor conformation of the neck. In other words, the way the neck comes up and out of the shoulders makes it hard for this mare to carry her head in a relaxed fashion we like to see in Western Pleasure.
The headset of the Western Pleasure horse really relates to his balance. The reason we like to see a real nice, level top line is because that's where he should be the most comfortable performing his maneuvers. If a horse is too low-headed, he has a tendency a lot of times to maybe be too heavy on his front end. The same way if he's too high-headed, he kind of has a tendency to keep him from being able to use his shoulders and his back as freely as he should. Usually when a horse is broke and they're finished, whenever they're balanced and they're real relaxed and they're extremely natural looking, their heads will be pretty close to level, and they will keep a pretty nice level top line. If you'll notice, a lot of times in your other events, in your reining events and in your cutting events, most of your better cutting horses and reining horses are horses that can perform their maneuvers at their heads close to level, slightly above. What this does is allow them to be able to lift their shoulders and use their backs, but still have their head and necks hung out for balance.
20% of the Western Pleasure class is judged on conformation, but a much higher percentage is really judged because the horse's conformation is going to determine how he moves, how he performs, and how consistent he is. Without the correct conformation, the horse cannot be comfortable, thus not perform or move to the high level that we're looking for today, whether it be the novice classes or the World Championship show. We're now looking at a 2-year-old prospect for Western Pleasure. This horse displays many of the qualities we're looking for today. As you can tell, he has a very pretty head, a very intelligent head. His eye is good and round. His ear is set on his head so as to display the intelligence that this horse has. The throat latch on this horse is very clean. It does not have too much excess fat here. If this horse had a thicker throat latch, then he would not be able to flex his head nor have the lateral movement that we're looking for trainability in a performance horse, and would probably not be able to carry his head in the desired manner. He has good length to his neck, and his neck ties into his shoulders very nice, neither too low nor too high. It will allow for this horse to be very flexible through his training and very balanced in his performance. The angle of the shoulder is basically this line right here, and it should be approximately the same angle as the pastern, both in keeping with the desired conformation we're looking for today. He displays a good prominent wither that is slightly higher than his hindquarters and allows for an engagement from this horse from behind. If his front end and shoulder are slightly elevated, it will allow for his front legs to move forward and his hind legs to engage. This 2-year-old prospect has a good prominent wither. It sets on his shoulders nice, and in keeping with a good wither, if the shoulder sets nice, then we're going to have the desired length of back that we're looking for, because the wither sets up and back, as opposed to a horse that's mutton withered, where he would be flat, the saddle would not sit on the horse as good, and the horse wouldn't be as comfortable through his performance. He displays a good leg set on his shoulder. It is neither too far forward nor too far back, which will again allow this horse to move in the correct manner. His hip is nice and flat over the top line, a good tail set on this horse. He is not too flat, has enough roundness though to have the desired performance. As we can tell, his hock is at a good angle. It's neither too bent nor too posty. The correct angle on the hind quarter of the horse, and especially the leg, should be, if you dropped a plumb bob right off the back of the horse's hip, it should basically dissect the hock and drop straight down behind the foot behind. This horse shows that angle through his hock, through his hip, stifle, and hock area. He has the form that will allow him to function and displays the form that we're looking for today. If the hind leg is set where it is actually back too far and what we would call a post-legged horse, then he will not be allowed to engage the hock, especially at the walk and the trot. If the hock has too much set in this area, then the leg will actually set too far forward, and when the horse moves, the point of his hock will come too far back, and he will not be able to keep his hind legs under him, again, especially at the trot. The conformation on this horse is going to allow him to be comfortable in his performance. As you can tell, he has a nice inverted V in his front end. He has enough muscling to be strong in his performance, but he doesn't have too much muscling to inhibit his movement. As you can tell, the front leg on this horse, especially from the shoulder down through the knee area and on down through the foot, is very correct. He has a good flat knee. The knee is not set too far on the outside of the cannon bone where we would have a bench-kneed horse. It's very flat. The correct conformation from his shoulder down through the knee all the way down through his ankle and through the toe of his foot is correct, and it's going to allow him to move straight over the middle of his toe and take the correct stride without inhibiting his motion by either winging or crossing over into his path of his other foot. When looking for a young prospect, we want to make sure the horse is well balanced behind as well as in front. If a horse would be lower in one hip than the other, it will affect his hind leg and affect the length of stride taken by that particular leg. This horse displays good balance. He's good and square over the top of his hip, comes down. He's good and square from the top of his hip here down through his stifle area, which again would show what good muscling in the stifle area. His gaskin is strong enough to propel him forward. He has a good square hock and strong hock in order to balance and sit on his hock as he performs, and helps him engage forward as well. The cannon bone is again short, which will allow the foot to come under him well. The hind feet on this horse are very correct. He's going to move over the middle of his toe, again, to be comfortable, to perform as we want. Here's a horse that has some conformation flaws that would inhibit its performance. This particular mare is fairly thick in her throat latch, which would inhibit her to flex correctly and probably be pretty hard for her to carry air and be comfortable through a long period of working. As you can see, she's a little bit ewe-necked right through this area, as opposed to the last horse we looked at, whose neck came higher out of his shoulders and was very flat on his underline. You remember, the other horse came out up here. This mare comes out down lower in her neck and has a little bit of a ewe-neck, which will also go along with her being a little bit lower in front of her withers than the last horse we looked at. As you can see, this horse has a much straighter shoulder as opposed to the last horse we looked at. And going along with a straighter shoulder is a much straighter and shorter pastern. As you can tell, this angle of the pastern and the angle of the shoulder are going to make this horse a shorter strided and choppier horse, which is undesirable for Western pleasure.
This is a good example of a horse whose conformation tends to keep it out of balance. Alex has shown us that this mare has a real steep, straight shoulder and pastern, that she is prone to be a real choppy and short-strided in the front. She's longer back than I would like, and she has more set to her hocks than I would like. But her hocks have enough set to them and stuff that she is prone to have a real long stride in the back legs, thus keeping her out of balance. She's going to be out of cadence. She's going to have a short, choppy stride in the front and a long stride in the back, and it'll keep her out of balance, and plus it's going to make it hard to train this mare. I don't like the way this mare's neck ties into her shoulder. She's short-necked. She doesn't tie in level across her top. She ties in real deep down here below, plus she is real thick here. This mare will have a hard time using her head and neck for balance, plus with the thickness, she'll have a tendency to be real heavy on her front end.
In this young prospect, we can see conformation faults that will make it hard for this horse to perform in Western pleasure. As you can tell, his hock is set behind him. Remember on the good horse that had the straight line that came down and bisected the hock and came down to the back of the foot? As you can tell on this particular horse, the line would come down almost to the front of the foot. So this horse's hock is going to make him have a shorter stride behind at the walk, jog, and lope, and it'll be hard for him to balance and lack the overall engagement that we'd desire in Western pleasure. From the rear view, this mare shows cow-hocked. As you can tell, she turns out drastically with both rear legs. She's going to be weak in her hock, and she's not going to have the engagement that we'd like to see in the Western pleasure horse because of these faults.
Here is a horse that shows you that in his front legs he is not very straight down. As you can look and see, you can see that both feet kind of toe out to the outside excessively. This horse, as you come down, you can see where his knee is, and below his knee, the rest of his legs kind of twist out a little bit, maybe a little bit more on the right. This knee is maybe is turned just a little bit more on the right. This horse also has a splint on his leg. Since he's not real straight-legged, this could have been caused from his conformation, from being just a little bit crooked. A splint is also caused a lot by concussion. A lot of horses, the same as this one, will have conformation flaws to them that you aren't very pretty to look at, but they really don't bother anything. In other words, on this particular horse, he toes out a little bit, he has a splint on his leg. That doesn't bother me in his performance.
You may want to consult your veterinarian and have a pre-purchase examination done prior to purchase. It's important to use a veterinarian who is familiar with your discipline so that they can accurately evaluate the horse for the task at hand. We're now looking at a yearling colt on the lunge line. In this colt, we'll be analyzing his movement while watching for his disposition and his overall attitude as it relates to training. When we're looking at yearlings, we're not going to be able to tell just how they're going to carry the rider's weight and how they'll move when the rider's actually on them. But we can see how natural they are, how they move with no rider on their back, and whether their conformation is going to tend to make them move bad at either the walk, jog, or lope. One thing I'd like for you to observe as this horse comes towards you is look how straight he breaks over his toe. There's no motion from side to side in this horse as he breaks over. He's straight over his toe. That's why it's easy for him. He's not having to fight bad conformation. He also has a slow rhythm as he moves across the ground. In other words, he's moving his legs forward in a natural, relaxed manner. He's not hurried over the ground. Everything's comfortable for the horse. The horse is comfortable moving over the ground because it is natural for him.
In this yearling prospect, as he goes around, he shows me a lot of usability. Again, he's showing me the balance that he has in his head and neck, thus allowing him to free up his shoulders and then use his back. He's showing me a lot of drive from behind, and he's showing me a lot of balance that I like to see. What he does is he lays his head and neck out in a real nice and relaxed manner, but you can also see that he uses that head and neck for balance. You can see that he's got his head and neck in a position where it makes it comfortable for him to pick up his back and pick up his shoulders and use them. At the same time, you can kind of see him want to kind of float his neck just a little bit. That shows me that he's real free and unrestricted through his shoulders. A lot of times we'll watch a yearling and we'll see one that's what I call real rigid. In his neck, they'll be real stiff. You won't really see any type of flow or anything in their neck. And if you watch them using their head and neck all the time, up and down, to help themselves move around, you know when you go to ride him, if you try to keep him to hold his head and neck still, he's not going to use his body. He's using his head and neck to keep his front end up. On this particular colt, his head and neck, he's just using it for balance. He's keeping his shoulders and his back up by all the lift that he's got in his shoulders and his back. His head and neck is strictly for balance. He's not using that to lift his body. And a lot of horses, if they've not been worked with very much as real young horses, they don't show you those qualities that you see for the ideal horse in the beginning. The one thing that they will not do, though, is they will not move bad at any one gait. But in the training, you can train and improve a horse if he's got a really good mind, and again, if his conformation is there, that allows him to be a nice balanced horse. Most of the time, training-wise, you can improve one.
Now that we've shown you good and bad conformation, good and bad movement, and we've lunged a young horse, we're back in the show arena to show you a group of really nice horses. Let's see how the conformation, movement, all pertain to showing in the show arena. As we discussed, the overall appearance of the Western Pleasure horse is a natural, free-flowing horse, relaxed, shows good conformation, and has good performance. In other words, he enjoys his job, he's relaxed when he's in the pen, and he's going to be consistent in his work.
Now let's show you a good example of a good, flat, 4-beat walk that we like to see. The bay mare that's across from me, you see this mare is going on. She's got a real nice, real relaxed walk. She's got a nice 4-beat walk. She's got using her ears good. She looks like she's just out on a real nice pleasure ride at a nice comfortable walk. Now we'll turn and I'll show you one example of a bad walk. As we can see, the sorrel horse up here is one that to me is an example of a horse that walks extremely too slow. Personally, I'd like to see this horse walk on out a lot freer and act like he's just kind of walking to get somewhere.
I feel that some riders in the Western pleasure industry get their horses walking at this pace because they're trying to gauge the distance between them and the rider in front of them. But as a showman, you must remember, there's probably someone coming behind you that's going to get the space instead of you. Now we're going to view these horses again at the jog. Let's look at the sorrel horse right in front of us. He has a nice, easy stride. It's in keeping with his conformation, but yet he has a very precise beat. Look at the diagonal legs, the left rear, the right front, and then the right rear and the left front, and see how precisely they hit the ground. And notice how he places his hind leg up underneath him. As you'll look at his hock, you'll see that it hardly ever comes back beyond the imaginary line that drops off the point of the hip and down to the ground. Very nice jogger.
In contrast now, let me show you a jog that is not as nice as these horses, that should be penalized. The sorrel horse here. Even though he's going along and he's going through the motions, if you'll watch this horse's legs, he's showing that he's not really staying in a true two-beat jog.
Like Mike said, in this horse, we can see a definite lack of cadence. There is not a two-beat gait. Instead, we have a four-beat gait. The horse is dragging its rear toe through the dirt, as you can see, and generally no engagement behind. Some judges feel the lope is the most important gait in Western pleasure. It is the hardest gait to keep the horse in a true form while on a loose rein or even with light contact. So it takes a real natural horse to perform this gait and do it in a relaxed fashion. Let's look at the Palomino horse that's coming by us now. Her left rear and her right front leg strike the ground at exactly the same time. The left front and the right rear strike separately, of course, but that gives us a true three-beat gait.
As you can see, this mare is a perfect example of what we mean by a horse that has a lot of cadence and rhythm. The cadence in her legs are perfect, the rhythm in her body is perfect, and this is as close to a perfect lope as you will find.
Look at this mare's head carriage. See how her nose is slightly in front of the vertical, showing lack of intimidation? And remember, wherever the horse's nose is, the leg is going to try to reach it. If the horse's nose is pinned back to its chest, then the legs are going to be pinned back underneath the horse as well. Again, look at the gray horse. When we talked about engagement earlier, we wanted the horse that really used his back, used his loin, and really used the joints in the rear leg to engage. This is a real good example. And see how the horse elevates his wither and moves his front leg forward because his hock is engaging.
Now, as you notice how easy he can perform this lope, let's take a look at the sorrel mare over here.
Let's look at this horse's head and neck as she's loping. You see how she's carrying it slightly to the outside and she's bobbing it up and down? She's doing this to try to pull her front end up and use it for balance, to help pull herself along. Her head, neck, and front end are all out of balance. They're down and she's trying to use it to pick herself up. It's a definite lack of balance. Let's look at the sorrel horse that's loping here for an example to compare with the last horse. Although this horse is moving at a slightly faster speed than some of the other horses we've seen, like the gray horse or the Palomino horse, he's performing a nice three-beat movement. He's relaxed. The rider is riding with light contact, which is perfectly legal in Western pleasure, although it's not going to beat the horse that's performing the gait in a more relaxed fashion.
To kind of put it in context, the sorrel horse over here with the blaze face should beat the little mare over here that's going real slow but is moving very bad.
In comparison, this bay mare is performing the lope with a greater degree of difficulty. and would place higher than the sorrel horse because she is more graceful across the ground while maintaining a soft, consistent rhythm.
The backup in the Western Pleasure class is another maneuver that we use to show the brokenness, the responsiveness, and the willingness of the horse to the rider's commands. The backup in the class is not more important and never should be considered really more important than the movement and the performance. But if a horse totally refuses to back and totally balks at doing it, the horse should be severely penalized for it. The most correct backup is a horse that'll back up, that'll give his head, he'll keep his mouth real quiet. You don't want to see any gapping of the mouth either in the backup. But you want to see a horse that gives to his rider's command and easily backs up without any resistance at all. You do want to see a horse that backs straight. That also shows a little more control and shows a little more brokenness in the horse. You don't want to see a horse to back, even if he's willing and stuff, you don't want to see him back off to one side or off to the other. The speed of the backup shouldn't make any difference. How fast the horse backs up or if he's slow shouldn't make a whole lot of difference as long as he shows a willingness to do it and doesn't show any resistance at all. Like this horse here should be severely penalized, maybe not even placed for this total refusement of the back which he has just shown us. Personally myself, I like to see the backup used in a case of breaking a tie. In other words, if two horses, in the judge's opinion, are equally tied. At the end of the class, whenever it comes to the backup, I like to see the backup used as a tiebreaker. The horse that backs up the most correct, shows the most willingness to do it and stuff, that's your tie-breaking system for doing that. The best age to buy a horse is really pretty hard to pinpoint. Personally myself, I like to buy yearlings. The babies are really hard to know exactly what they're going to be when they grow up. By the time a horse is a late yearling, he kind of shows you exactly what he's going to do. He's grown enough and he's matured enough. You know what he's going to look like body-wise and conformation-wise. You can look at his movement then, and I think it's a safe area to get started at. But now for novice youth and novice amateurs and people that's just getting started into the business, I really recommend buying the older horses, horses that are 4 or 5, 6 years old or older. I think you need to get in and get used to riding the Western Pleasure horses. You need to develop your horsemanship skills. As you develop those horsemanship skills, you also develop more knowledge of what kind of horse it is that you're really looking for. When I think back, and I have a lot of people ask me from time to time, which are the best horses that you've ever rode? Which is the very best horse that you've ever rode? That's really hard to answer. I've been very fortunate to ride a lot of really nice horses. Some horses were maybe better movers than others, but it's hard for me to name my very best horse because some of the horses ended up giving me so much more than what they were supposed to be, and my relationship with those horses were special. And again, that's something that I enjoy. It'd be very hard. The one thing that all the great horses that I've had have in common are that they're great movers and they're great performers, and they were great friends of mine.
I hope you've enjoyed the video and gained some insight into how to select and show the Western Pleasure horse. Remember, find a horse with engagement, cadence, rhythm, and you'll have a horse that's easier to ride, easier to train, and you'll win a lot more blue ribbons.
Hopefully you'll get a chance to ride a really good Western Pleasure horse. They truly are a pleasure to ride.
We'll see you at the next show.